Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. It is week 3 here in the Canadian Football League. It's hard to believe 2 weeks in the books already. Crazy 2 weeks, if you ask me, in the CFL. And we will get into all of that in just a moment, as well as preview week 3 in the CFL. Ian Cameron, and we have a guest with us this week. Pro hockey player for many, many years, coaching still in hockey, living in Europe right now, Austria specifically, big-time sports bettor, including CFL bettor. And that's why we've got him here. And CFL fan, unfortunately, hate to break the news, he's an Argos fan. He's a dirty fucking Argo fan, unfortunately. But hey, if anything, look, I'm a caring man, and this is proof right now that doesn't matter what fan of a team you're a fan of, we can break bread, we can be civil, we can get along, and that's what we're showing, that an Argo fan and a Ticats fan can coexist right here on the Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy show. But very happy in all seriousness to bring along Chris Dalvies as our guest here. Chris, welcome to the Frenzy. How are you?
Ian, thank you for having me. It's been a long time. We will be coexisting, or at least I hope, throughout this show. Grew up Toronto. Played hockey. It was the only thing to do back at that time. But my parents have always been Argos from day one, so that's where I grew up. I grew up at the Skydome, and I grew to love the game. It was I find it an entertaining product. I feel like I don't have to convince anyone watching here, but that's just how I kind of got into it, and followed the team. Still follow the team from living in Austria now. Can't really get to many games, although I will be, as we discussed, Ian, back in July, and I'm fired up for another CFL season.
No doubt. Definitely, I can guarantee you, Chris, the people that are watching this show right now love the CFL. Yeah. We don't have to worry about people that hate the league tuning into this show every week, but there's no doubt it's a fun brand of football. I love the CFL for its differences. I don't want it to be the same in the exact same rules and the exact same style of football as the NFL or college football in the U.S. I want it to be different. I like the 3-down element, of CFL football. I like the rouge. I like the strategy of an intentional safety, usually when you're inside the 5-yard line and you have to punt on 3rd down. I like a lot of the nuances there with the league. I like that, I like their challenge system, and the way it's set up right now. And I think it's gotten a lot better over the years. There's just the waggle, of course. Receivers can be in motion before the snap of the football. I mean, it's just, there's differences that are good, because it's different. It's not the same as the NFL. And people will say, well, I know the NFL rules are better. I don't care, better or not. I like that there's the differences in the CFL, to me, make it cool, make it unique, make it something I enjoy.
Indeed. But I got to ask you, what were you thinking last Sunday? Were you appreciative of the differences when you're up? Were you up 7 with a minute to go, or was it?
You just had to go there, huh? You just had to. Not even 5 fucking minutes into this show, you're bringing that damn game up last week with the Ticats just shitting the bed in the last few minutes against the Saskatchewan Roughriders in that game.
Yeah,
like I said on Twitter, though, man, terrible, brutal night as a Ticat fan. Great night, though, as a CFL bettor, because yours truly had the over in that game, and it was my best bet in week 2 as well. We had definitely had more money on that over in that Riders-Cats game than anything. And of course, some people will look at it as sacrilege. I look at it as smart, savvy betting and investing. I did grab a little Saskatchewan live.
Hey, it's a no-lose bet.
Yeah. Hey, I've seen it before with the Ticats. They blew a few of those games, especially at home last year. And they did it again in week 1. So we'll recap that in just a moment. But just briefly on you being in hockey all these years, just a quick little retrospect, I guess you can say, of the hockey life over there for you the last several years.
Sorry, you got to stop this part. You might have to cut it.
No, go ahead. Okay. We're still going. You're good.
Okay. Sorry, I had to. Yeah. Yeah. So hockey. It's a different mentality of hockey. I started in the first league over in Austria, coming from the AHL, and of course that's full-fledged professional league. Um, but then you get to the last 5 years of my career, I dropped down into the second league. So I'm playing. I'm playing as a pro. The majority of my locals, which are the Austrians, they're working during the day, so we're practicing at night, which in one respect is really cool because it allows me to kind of stay on the sporting schedule of
Yep.
North America, which is kind of how I stepped up my interest in betting because I didn't have to be up at 7 in the morning. I didn't have to be on the ice at 10. Um,
You
I
could
kind of
more follow, your NFL and college football, CFL, anything in North
Sundays.
America. Yeah.
Sundays were much better,
NBA.
and our home games were Saturdays,
Yeah.
so it impacted my Sunday null, as they say in German, which is zero. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. But I mean, there's always a time when you gotta say it's over, and now it's over.
I know. By the way, there's lots of YouTube clips of Chris floating around from his Stockton Heat days, and those were a long, long time ago.
Ooh, Stockton, yeah,
Yeah,
we were the Thunder. We were the
yeah,
Thunder back then.
they were the Thunder. Yeah, Stockton. It was the ECHL team. Yeah, but you can find Chris doing, I think, a bunch of interviews because I remember when I was first asked him. It's funny. I first asked him to be on the Ice Guys show, and he said, "But you know what? I'm not really on top of things with the NHL right now. Probably wouldn't be the best decision as a guest." And I found out, even though he's played hockey all these years, he's way more locked in and amped up and fired up and dialed in for football betting and basketball betting and all the other sports. So that's when we decided, you know what, Chris, we'll get you on something else. We'll get you on one of my shows in the other sports other than hockey. And voila, now here he is in living color on the Football Frenzy.
I'm happy to be here, and I think I can provide a little more insight than I would be about your NHL.
Yeah, no doubt. But like I said, we'll see if next year and beyond, Chris is able to follow the NHL a little bit more than currently or in the past. And if so, we'll definitely get him on the Ice Guys show with me, Alex B. Smith, Matt Robinson, and the great crew, the great family we have there. But in the meantime, CFL. First of all, betting wise, you told me off the air, and you can tell this to the audience as well. Mostly football, basketball. Those are your two sports that you focus on, right?
Yep. I really like the CFL. It's a condensed schedule. You got to focus on 9 teams as opposed to what 30.
4 games a week, and this time
Yeah.
of year, you got one game a night. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I love the way
Yeah.
they
You
unveil the
you
schedule.
can really lock in. So yeah, and it's a Canadian product, and I'm a Canadian guy. So
Yeah, there you go. We support the CFL. You and I, that's the one thing we have in common. We're on the other side of the big rivalry here, the Battle of the QEW, but we support our teams and we love the league. And that's
for
respect.
sure.
That's respect that goes beyond, cheering for one team or cheering for another team. And if you're rivals, who the hell cares? You're CFL family at the end of the day, right?
That's right.
You and
That's
I,
right.
we love the league and we love our teams. And that's a beautiful thing about the people that love the CFL. The ones that love it really, really, really love it.
That is
And
true.
I found that out at the Grey Cup Festival last year, Chris, because even though the Ticats weren't in the game, when the Grey Cup was in Hamilton, Montreal, and Winnipeg, I was there for that game. It was a great game, by the way. I would have been disappointed if I wasn't there because there was a time I was thinking, if the Ticats don't get in there, I don't know if I'll go to the game, but I still did. I kept my seat because I'm a season ticket holder, and you get a Grey Cup seat. I kept it. Went to the game and just meeting all the people during the week, Rider fans and Rider jerseys, even though their team wasn't playing, BC Lions fans in Lions jerseys, even though their team wasn't playing, Calgary Stampeders fans in Stamp jerseys, even though their team wasn't playing. Just a nice blend of the CFL community coming together for that week during the Grey Cup in Hamilton. And it was cool. It was great to meet so many fans from different teams, different cities, different places in Canada, and just become friends with some of them. And some of them now I met that week, and I've still got contact with them, either cell phone or Twitter or email or something. And, I keep in touch with some of them that I met that week in
Yeah.
November
Hey.
for Grey Cup Festival week. So just really, really cool.
Yeah. It's a great week, and on average, I'd say the product, meaning the end game, is better than the Super Bowl in terms of the game. So yeah, It's a great week, but at the same time, I enjoy the season. I enjoy the whole thing.
No doubt. I'm with you there. I love I love that it's a 20-week season. People complain, oh, it's too long. Well, guess what? Newsflash, folks. The NFL is doing the fucking same thing
Yeah.
sooner rather than later. Very soon, the NFL is going to be 20 weeks as well and 18 games in the regular season. Well, I don't know about, they'll probably still only have one bye week compared to two. So I should say 19 weeks and 18 regular season games. But the NFL is going to move to 18. It's going to happen. It's just a question of when. Not if. It's going to happen. Like, I know they play 17 right now, but they're going to eventually get to 18 games, and they're going to cut their preseason down maybe even further. Basically becoming what the CFL has been for as long as I've been alive, with just the two preseason games and then the 18 regular season games. So yeah, NFL is kind of taking a page out of the CFL playbook, if you will, with the way they're shifting their schedule, increasing the regular season and decreasing the preseason.
And you got to think at some point they're going to add a 10th team too, just to balance it out.
Yeah.
That way you don't need to give
Quebec City or Halifax
will
get a team. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. They're the most likely candidates, I think, to get a CFL team, balance the league. Because right now you got 5 West teams, you got 4 East teams, and I think eventually you want to get it even. And the more likely new destination of a new team in the CFL and expansion team is either Quebec City or Halifax. They've been talking about the Atlantic Schooners here for a long, long time, and we're still waiting. And I do think
we're waiting on a stadium.
Yeah, they are. They're waiting on that deal to get done for the stadium. But I know one of my good friends, and he's a good CFL bettor and handicapper himself. You know him well, Andrew McGinnis. He was on the Ice Guys show with us for a few years. He definitely wants a team out there in Halifax, and hopefully they do get one out there sooner rather than later. All right, let's get into some CFL for week 3. I can't believe it's week 3 already. The first 2 weeks flew by. Our first game coming up on Thursday night. It is the Ottawa Red Blacks taking on the Montreal Alouettes. We've got Montreal right now, 6.5-point home favorites. Percival Molson Stadium, of course. 47.5 being the total in this game. The Montreal Alouettes. My first thought, Chris, coming into the season is, were the Montreal Alouettes a true, dominant, upper echelon, number 1 team in the CFL last year? Or did they just get red hot down the stretch and rode the wave of, just this incredible, streak down the stretch where they won their last handful of regular season games? They pulled a massive upset. Sorry, hey, turnabout is fair play. You brought up the Ticats collapsing last week. I'm going to remind you of what happened to the Argos last year in the East Final with that absolutely horrendous game against the aforementioned Montreal Alouettes. They turned Chad Kelly into a turnover machine in that game. Just ball-hawking defense and secondary. Marc-Antoine Dequoy. I think Chad Kelly is still having nightmares of Marc-Antoine Dequoy in his sleep right now.
You can still be running.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was just an outstanding, smothering defensive effort from Montreal. They went toe-to-toe against the team that's been the hallmark team of the CFL for the last 5 years, Winnipeg in the Grey Cup, and they just made one play more. Cody Fajardo with the drive late in the game to give them that victory. Phil Pott getting the game winner for the Alouettes there. Just a tremendous Grey Cup game. I was there in person, and it was a great finish to the season. They were the hottest team, and sometimes, like you say, you get in and you're red hot at the right time, you can win a championship. But my thought coming into the year was, are they really that a great team, or do they just get red hot? Can they sustain this for a full 2024 CFL season? Well, so far so good. I mean, they're 2-0. They demolished Winnipeg again in the Grey Cup revenge rematch, if you will, in week 1. And then last week against Edmonton, I thought they pretty much controlled the line of scrimmage. You saw the run game get going. Now, the Edmonton Elks, for the second year in a row, are starting over on defense. They basically changed the entire personnel of their defense again, and that's not exactly a recipe for success on that side of the football early in a new season when you're integrating so many new faces onto that side of the ball. But nevertheless, Montreal did take advantage of that. However, I did have a piece of Edmonton plus the points last week against Montreal, and the backdoor cover from good old MBT, McLeod Bethel Thompson, coming through there with that late score in the final minute to turn that into from a 23-13 deficit to 23-20, which ended up being the final score for Montreal. I'll take it. there's nothing more glorious, Chris, for a bettor, especially in football, than the old backdoor, or basketball for that matter, than the backdoor cover.
That's correct. But to answer your question, regarding Montreal, I thought they were an average team for 3/4 of that season last year.
And you could even say below average for 3/4 of the season. Yep.
Yeah, and it was a typical, as an Argos fan, it was a typical Argos Grey Cup run. Hover around 500, find your stride, get your cohesion together, and gel at the right time. And that's what they did. Was it tough for me personally to digest? Of course, but I think they've carried it over into this season. And do I think they're a great team? I don't. Do I think they're a very good team? I do. They work well together. They have an excellent defense, timely offense. They're not going to blow you out of the water, but they're going to put their defense in a position to succeed. And this week, this matchup, I'm also really encouraged from what I see in Ottawa. In years past, I've been very fast to write them off, and I think it's been warranted. But they revamped the offensive line. Darius Bladick came over from Toronto. They picked up Dominic Rhymes, and they got Drew Brown. I like the direction they're headed, and I specifically liked the fact that they were able to maul the defensive line of Winnipeg last week and really dictate that game.
I think Hamilton's still regretting that Lorenzo Malden IV slipped through their fingers.
I think so too.
He was on their team, and he's been in Ottawa, and he had a great year last year, and he looked really good in the first game for them against Winnipeg in the victory last week. So they're building something. Their line of scrimmage needed improvement, both sides.
After
last year. The D-line needed improvement, and the O-line definitely needed improvement. And I thought both lines of scrimmage, D-line and O-line, last week against Winnipeg were better than anything I saw from Ottawa last year. And you mentioned Dominique Rhymes. All of a sudden, you put him with Jalen Acklin. You got this Raquel Armstead. I love him at running back, the kid out of Temple. This was a great running back in college with the Temple Owls. With the Temple Owls. He was really good down there, and nice to see him back in football. I know he bounced around a couple of the spring leagues for the last few years, but now he's in the CFL. He looked great running the football last week for Ottawa. No, they're building something. And I said coming into the year, this has the potential to be an ATS machine from a point spread standpoint. A team that you don't know how many games they're going to win, but they're going to be a dog in the majority of their games because of how bad they were last year. And sure enough, first game of the year, albeit Winnipeg has some issues, clearly, compared to what we've seen the last few years. But first game of the year, what did we see, Chris, from Ottawa? An outright win as a dog. 7.5-point dogs, didn't even need the points, winning outright last week against the Bombers. So I agree with you there. I think Ottawa definitely is on the upward trajectory. They're going to be a very competitive team this year, and they are not going to be that team that other opponents are going to be able to just roll over this year.
Yeah, because last year they had a decent defense, I would say, but they never had that offensive component. Now they have that. They showed the ability to maul the opponent's defensive line. I'm looking at what Sankey and Sean Lemon are going to do to stop this run game, because I think Ottawa's kind of live here.
You and I are in agreement, my friend. First game that we've analyzed, you and I together here on the Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy Show, and you and I are in agreement. In fact, this line opened Montreal 7.5-point home favorites earlier in the week, and I sent out my first bet of the season not the season. Obviously, I've bet CFL already. It's been 2 weeks into the season. My first bet of the week, I should say, in the CFL. I sent it out to all my members already, and I'll just say what it is right here. It is Ottawa plus 7.5. I got on it at the really good opening number. We've seen it move down to 6.5. I really, truly think this team is going to be very competitive. And to me, I look at Montreal, Chris, and I do think their offense and their passing game in particular is better. You know what's funny about Montreal is they haven't run the football all that well. And, with whether it's just Renantwi or Walter Fletcher, They haven't consistently run the ball. Think about last week against Edmonton, and Walter Fletcher had those 2 big plays for touchdowns. Yeah, both of them were like pass plays. They were like little screen passes. It's not like they were handing it off to him and showing that the run blocking from the O-line was on point and they were just running the ball down Edmonton's throat. They really weren't. And that's actually 2 weeks. They didn't run the ball that great against Winnipeg either in week 1, Montreal, even though they also won that game as well. You look at their team stats here so far for the rushing yards. It hasn't been great. Their offense for the whole season, Montreal so far, 8th out of 9 teams in total yards so far this year. And the one thing about Ottawa last year, I remember this, even though it was a dreadful season for the Red Blacks, is that their run defense was actually quite strong last year. And in the first game last week for Ottawa against Winnipeg, Brady Oliveira, I should say, didn't play. Sorry about that. Forgot he didn't play in that game, but he didn't. But nevertheless, Winnipeg's known to run the football and run the football well, and they held the Bombers to just 42 rushing yards in that game last week. So here's my question, and I can tell you kind of probably agree with this because you're kind of leaning Ottawa as well, like me. If Montreal can't run the ball here successfully against Ottawa's run D, which was very good last year and showed very good last week against Winnipeg, can Cody Fajardo pass them to not only a victory, you got to win by margin. You have to win by a touchdown or more, if you're going to cash a ticket, if you're an Alouettes backer here in this game. And I know that I like what they're doing at receiver. Now, Snead didn't play last week. Very good receiver out of East Carolina. We'll see if he's back this week, but they do have weapons. They have a Philpott. They have Keon Julian Grant is healthy again. There's no doubt they've got some good receivers for Fajardo. And like I said, I do think their passing game this year is a little bit better than it was last year. But it's still, if you're reliant more on the pass and can't get the run game going, you also know there's that fear of Cody Fajardo making that mistake, which he can do. Put the ball into harm's way if there's very little run game working for them. And that's what would concern you. And again, turnovers seem to crop up more for this Alouettes team when they don't have that success running the ball. So it's kind of like good and bad Fajardo in games where they don't run it. And that's what we've seen. We saw that last week. A lot of good, but there were a couple bad moments for him as well, even though they did beat the Elks. And let's also keep in mind the Elks defense is not going to be very good again this year. Certainly not early in the season when you're changing over the personnel on that side of the ball like crazy, like Chris Jones is doing once again. And I know for Chris Jones, he keeps saying the same shit. We think we got a pretty good football team here as far as his Edmonton Elks. But I think when you look at it, when you're just changing over the defense like that, and there's new faces on the D-line, the linebacking core, the secondary, you're not going to be able to gel and play good defense right away. Hell, they may be not able to gel at all, if the season, maybe they'll get better, but it's certainly not going to happen right away. So I take that offensive effort last week against Edmonton with a grain of salt. Winnipeg's defense, I don't think, has been anything to write home about so far this year. They've got new faces in the secondary as well. Big Hill missed a game. Jackson Jeffcoat retired in the offseason, one of their best pass rushers. I think Willie Jefferson is showing a little age now, long in the tooth type of deal. Not that he can't still be a great player, and I think he is still a very good player, but I don't think he's going to be that dominant pass rush sack monster maybe that he's been in years past. So I actually think Montreal offensively will be challenged here by this improved Ottawa defense. And by the way, Ottawa's also had a shit ton of injuries in the secondary the last 2 years. I remember last year, like half their starting defensive backs, corners and safeties were out for them. And suddenly they're much healthier now with their pass defense, and that should help them as well. And then you look at series history with these two teams. Now, last time they met in Montreal was last October the 9th at the end of the 2023 season. It was a 29-3 beatdown for Montreal. But think about the situation. Montreal was red hot. That's when they were really starting to get it rolling late in the season. And Ottawa had quit. Ottawa had banged up beyond belief. Yeah, they were banged up beyond belief. They were quarterback injuries, secondary injuries. They knew that the season was over. They weren't going anywhere. They had a horrendous – Ottawa was getting blown out almost every week, down the stretch last year. So take that with a grain of salt. But before that 29-3 Montreal win here at Molson Stadium in October last year, the games before that in Montreal, let me rhyme off the scores. Last June, 19-12. Montreal. October 2022 in Montreal, An outright win as underdogs for Ottawa, 24-18. September 2022, an outright win as underdogs for Ottawa in Montreal, 38-24. And then November 2021, 11-point dogs, Ottawa was. They won 19-18 outright. So before that debacle last October, when Montreal's rolling and Ottawa basically waved the white flag and quit, at that point of the season, before that last game in Montreal, every recent meeting between these teams in Montreal, Ottawa was in the game and or won outright.
Yeah.
So give me the points here with Ottawa. I'm with you. Anything more you want to say? That's your cue.
Nope.
What do you think of the total?
I don't see.
And a half.
I'm sorry?
What do you think of the total here? 47 and a half. Do you have? I lean under.
I lean under as well.
I'm not betting Montreal over the total. Their defense is really good. I don't think Drew Brown is going to go up and down the field on this very good defense. And the one thing that does worry me as someone that's backing Ottawa here is the interception might creep up for him. He's still a young quarterback, especially only his second official start as a number one guy, and that is a ball hawking defense led by Dequoy. Sutton as well. They've got some guys that can get after the football and cover down the field. So I do worry about that a little bit. But I don't think Montreal's going up and down the field against this improved Ottawa defense either. And like I said, Montreal, their defense is, I think, still a little bit better than their offense, and they're 2-0 to the under so far this season. Both Montreal games have stayed under the total.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see how Montreal chooses to attack the defense. As you said, the D line for Ottawa is very good. Do you want to be in 2nd and 8 all night long? I don't think so. Do you want to pass first down? As a extended run. That'll be curious to me. I don't think they're going to be able to stretch the field. I feel like Philpott's going to be keyed on. They're banged up with Snead. He's on the 6th game. And on the other side of the ball, Reggie Stubblefield, he's also on a 6th game. So that's one of your, although they're a very balanced defense, that's a key injury. If you remember last playoffs, I guess it was the Eastern Final and the Grey Cup, he played a huge role in both those games. And can they get by without him? That remains to be seen. But this Ottawa team, I mean, they like to shove it down your throat, and we're going to see what Montreal's made of.
Yeah, no doubt. The good news is they do have Dylan Wynn, who they got from my Ticats, healthy. It looks like he's going to play in this game. But you're right, Stubblefield's a big loss, a nice component in that defense. Like I said, for Montreal, I think they're going to be one of those teams that, because they won the Grey Cup and they're on this incredible straight-up winning streak dating back to last year. Like Montreal is on like this 10-0 straight-up streak, 8-1-1 against the spread going back to last year. But there was a point spread loss last week against an Edmonton team that to me is pretty weak. Ottawa's improved. And to me, Montreal is going to be one of these teams, Chris. If they win games, I think a lot of them are going to be one-score victories.
Yeah.
To me, they're not the kind of, they're going to blow them out and whip teams week in and week out by 10, 14, 21 points. I don't think they're built that way.
No, they don't have that firepower. And I think this team is built through the back end. And like you said, these wins are going to be tight. Are they going to get wins? Of course. They are a good team. But they're not the BC Lions offense.
We're seeing a lot of backdoor stuff, too, going on. Look at Saskatchewan, against Hamilton last. Look at BC with a late field goal to cover against Calgary. Yeah. The late backdoor touchdown for Edmonton to cover last week against Montreal. So that's why it's always a little tricky. And the underdog continues to be dominant in this league. Mm-hmm. Aside from BC, by the slimmest of margins, covering against Calgary last Saturday, other than that one game, underdogs are 7-1 against the spread in the first 2 weeks of the CFL season. 7-1 ATS for underdogs so far this season in the Canadian Football League. So it's tough to lay points right now. It really is, especially when you're talking about 6.5, 7.5 points when I got on it with Ottawa earlier in the week. So it's definitely been an underdog-heavy start to the year here in the Canadian Football League, no question about that. All right, next up as we continue along here, we've got the BC Lions taking on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Friday night football tonight. There we go. Winnipeg minus 2.5-point home favorites, 51.5 the total. I could tell Chris liked that little song, musical interlude right there. As far as this game goes with the Lions and the Bombers, what's the old saying? Don't step in front of the falling knife. Winnipeg's a falling knife right now. Yet this does feel a little bit like one of those home games, small home favorite, answer the bell, desperation takes over, sense of urgency ramps up for a team that's got a lot of veteran savvy, a lot of winning experience, 2 Grey Cup championships, 4 straight Grey Cup appearances. Are they really going to fall to 0-3 and lose 2 straight at it's not even fucking IG Field anymore. It's some other name now, whatever they call that stadium now in Winnipeg. But nevertheless, are they going to lose 2 in a row on a home field that has been absolutely dominant for them and a house of horrors for the opponent over the years? I don't know about that. I'll put it this way, though. I ain't laying with Winnipeg here. I'm not. Doesn't mean I'm going to be on BC for sure in this game, but I don't like what I see, flat out. I don't like what I see. I don't like that they don't have Richie Hall anymore as DC. I think Jordan Younger, maybe he's going to be a good defensive coordinator in time, but I don't love what I'm seeing from the defense. The run defense hasn't been as good. They've been thrown on. They've been giving up big plays. That's not typical of this Winnipeg defense. And then the offense is a mess. It's not only a mess, Chris, in terms of the play on the field and the performance level. It's a mess from an injury standpoint. Look at the injuries that are mounting right now for Winnipeg on that side of it. They already lost Kenny Lawler in week 1, one of their best receivers to injury. And no telling when I think he's on the 6th game. So he's not going to be back anytime soon. Brady Oliveira didn't play last week in that game. We'll have to see if he's back for this one. Dalton Schoen got banged up. He's been, one of their top receivers the last year or two for this Winnipeg team. Is he going to be in any sort of ability to play Friday night here against BC? The O-line is the area of this team that I think is clearly not as good. No. This has been an O-line with Stanley Bryan on the left side, Patty Neufeld, all these same fucking guys that you've heard for years on this O-line. And Hardrick's gone, of course, and that I think is a huge loss. We're finding that out right now because you look at Saskatchewan, they now have Jamarcus Hardrick, and look at how much better their O-lines looked compared to years past, the first 2 games, and look at how weaker the Winnipeg offensive line looks without him in their first 2 games. So the O-line's in shambles. They can't run the ball. And don't give me this bullshit that they didn't run the ball well last week because Oliveira didn't play. That's a bunch of garbage. That's a bunch of nonsense. They didn't run the ball well either with Oliveira against Montreal in week 1. So this is clearly an O-line issue. It's got nothing to do with missing your number 1 running back. This is an O-line problem. You're not run blocking well enough. You're not imposing your will along the line of scrimmage. You're not winning your one-on-one blocking battles and assignments at the point of attack. That's what this is right now for Winnipeg on the offensive line. And the pass protection's been sketchy. Kolaros has been under way more duress. And like I say, they missed Jeffcoat, who retired. Jefferson's not getting any younger. So I think that is a bit of an issue and a concern as well for Winnipeg. I see a lot of issues, and I don't know if it's just to snap their fingers. They're back home here against BC. They're going to fix those issues necessarily. Now, BC is coming in off a big win against Calgary, 1-1. Now, the concern about BC that I would have as far as taking them in this game is the fact that the BC Lions on the road got whipped by your Argos. I don't want to say whipped, but because the score was close. It was a close game. It was a competitive game. They got whipped along the line of scrimmage, both lines of scrimmage, BC, in that game against Toronto. Toronto's O-line, Kadeem Carey, they had no problem running the ball. Cameron Dukes had all kinds of success throwing the ball. I said when that game was going on, should have known that a Cameron knows what he's doing out there. When I saw Cameron Dukes playing well. Chad who? I mean, he really looked good, Cameron Dukes. And if you're an Argo fan, you got to be amped up and fired up to see. And we'll get more to the Toronto side of things. We'll save it for when we talk Edmonton, Toronto. But, BC had their issues, containing the Argo offense, stopping the run. The D-line didn't get any pass rush on Dukes, except the one play where he had that, he he ran himself out of racetrack, circling around, and ended up losing the ball, getting hit, and they scooped it up, scored a touchdown. Other than that, BC really didn't have a great pass rush against Toronto. And then you flip it around, BC's defensive line or BC's offensive line had trouble blocking. Vernon Adams was under pressure. Toronto got after it. Their O-line was better against Calgary last week, but the O-line is still a work in progress for me with BC as well coming into this game. Their defense here last week I thought was better against Calgary. That being said, they also still gave up, a lot of passing yards in that game. They stopped the run. I will say that Dedrick Mills didn't do much running the ball for the Stampeders, but still Jake Mayer ended up going for almost 400 passing yards or something in that game, close to that against that BC secondary, which does have some holes in it. So to me, there's just questions galore. And of all the games here in week 3, Chris, I'll be the first to admit right now, this is one I don't have a strong opinion on, side-wise or totals-wise. I think the total 51.5 is pretty high because I could see this being 33-27, like an all-out shootout. But I could see offensive issues with the O-lines being a little sketchy. I've seen instances where both of these teams have settled for field goals and not finished drives with touchdowns in the first 2 weeks, and that's not good if you're betting the over in this game. So the total I could see going either way. Just don't have a strong feel or opinion on this game, and that's okay. You don't have to have a strong opinion on any game. But what do you think here, Chris, with BC Winnipeg Friday night?
Obviously not impressed with either team too much. You made note of Winnipeg's offensive struggles, which are valid. They did play Montreal and Ottawa, two of the, I would say, marquee defenses in the league. So perhaps playing BC, who I don't think that secondary is very good. In fact, I know through 2 weeks they have not played very well. I think they're somewhat soft along each line. And although Winnipeg has lost a lot of talent, you can't deny that they've lost a lot of talent. They still have Grey Cup champions. They have a Grey Cup champion coach. The fan base is all over them. They got to be all over them. I think you see Winnipeg's best. And is it the Winnipeg best from 2021, 22? Perhaps not, but I think you see them grind out a win, and I'd lean the -2.5, but I really like the under. I just think that Adams is going to be on the run, and so will Caleros for that point, and that's going to lead to a lot of stalled drives and punts, and I see it as a 23-16 type game. So hitting the under, but I like Winnipeg to win this game. I think it's kind of a must game for them.
All right, liking Winnipeg, Chris here, -2.5, or at least leaning in that direction with them here in this game. I don't want to say pass, so like I say, don't expect me to be betting this, but I'll throw it out there. Like if you force me to actually make a pick and bet this game from a side perspective, I would take BC. +2. And that's how concerned I am with Winnipeg right now. Plus, you got BC coming in here playing Winnipeg for the first time after losing again to the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the West Final. For the second straight year, they lose to Winnipeg in the West Final. So West Final revenge, if you will.
I just think you're catching them at the wrong time. If this is the middle of the year when Winnipeg has kind of corrected some issues, yeah. But this is desperation time. The Winnipeg fans need this win. The media is all over them. Again, you want to start the year 0-2 at home? I can't see it happening.
Winnipeg is 5-1 straight up and against the spread, by the way, the last 6 meetings against BC. The only win and cover for BC was that shocker at the beginning of last year in June when they went to Winnipeg and they won 30-6, and they just completely dominated Winnipeg. But other than that, it's been a Winnipeg recent series history. Like I said, 5-1 straight up in ATS for the Bombers in the last 6 meetings between these two teams. So fascinating to see how this one plays out. But like I said, it feels like it's definitely a clear, if you're into the spot and situationals, it's probably a Winnipeg spot. Like they're desperate. Back home, 0-2. They don't want to go 0-3. Are they good enough, though? That's my big question. Are they good enough right now? And is this veteran experience and Mike O'Shea and Zach Collaros and this leadership, Adam Bighill, this leadership group that they have, can they rally the troops here and get their shit together and play a good 60 minutes of football, both sides of the ball? To me, I still want to see it before I believe it for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. By the way, I said it all season so far on this show, and I'll say it again. I'm not concerned about the BC receiving corps. People were worried that Lucky Whitehead's gone. People were worried that Dominique Rhymes is gone. They're fine. That's not the issue. They've got good receivers still, good talent. Justin McGinnis has been outstanding. Justin McInnis has been great for them. Javon Catoy is an outstanding receiver. Alexander Hollins. They've still got lots of good weapons for Vernon Adams. Their issues are in the trenches and the secondary. That's where BC has to continue to get better. Quite frankly, both of these, they're mirror images. You can say the same shit for Winnipeg. That the O-line and the D-line and the secondary are the issues for them right now. So these are two teams with three position groups all kind of concerning and questionable at the same time. BC's O-line, BC's D-line, BC's secondary, and you can probably say that about Winnipeg too. So it makes it a fascinating game to watch pretty much, Chris, Friday night. Someone is going to figure it out and get a win here. All right, let's go to Saturday night. BMO Field, Edmonton Elks, Toronto Argonauts. We've got Toronto 6-point home favorites, 49.5 the total here in this game. This is a McLeod Bethel Thompson Bowl. If it was a college football bowl game, that's what they'd call it. He makes his return to Toronto facing his old team, the Argos, here in this game. Edmonton 0-2 to start the year. They had that awful fourth quarter against Saskatchewan in week 1 where they were up, 21-8, and they got outscored 21 straight points in the Riders. 2 straight comeback wins for them this year, including against this Edmonton team, 29-21 in week 1. And then last week, Edmonton was never blown out by Montreal, but it never felt like they were going to win that game. I mean, they were in it. They hung around, but they just couldn't get over the hump there against the Alouettes. To me, McLeod Bethel Thompson has shown me some good moments. There's been moments of him moving the ball. There's been moments, and when he gets time in the pocket, and look, Chris Dalvis, our guest here, saw a lot of this guy a couple years ago in Toronto when he was a member of the Argos. When he gets time to throw the ball, he can be very accurate. He can be a very good thrower of the football. When he can set his feet, look downfield, have a clean pocket, and find an open receiver. That's when he can be a damn good quarterback, MBT. But it's when you disrupt him, you get the pressure, you get people, just rushing him from the either side of the edge and getting in his vision, getting in his feet. And when he can't step up into the throw, that's when he makes his mistakes. That's when he makes his interceptions. And obviously, if he's under pressure, he's not getting away from it because he just does not have the mobility that the other quarterbacks in the CFL, many of them do. So that is going to be something here to watch for Edmonton here against a Toronto defense that, last I checked, their defensive line is pretty ferocious. There's a Toronto defensive line that is so solid that they said goodbye to Sean Oakman. Sean Oakman's a pretty solid football player, quite honestly, and yet they cut him. They cut him loose because they've just got so much depth there along the front seven. Really, they can get pressure. They can do a pretty good job against the run. Now, I was concerned they did lose a few pieces, and they definitely lost a couple pieces on in the secondary, and a couple of those pieces came to my team, the Ticats. Jamal Peters in the secondary, Brandon Barlow, who had a great game for the Ticats, albeit in a losing effort against Saskatchewan last week. So I was concerned a little bit, about the depth along the D-line, the depth in the secondary compared to last year. But, I was impressed watching them against BC in that game. Of course, that's still the only game that the Argos have played. They had a bye week last week, so they just have the one game under their belt so far that they had against BC a couple weeks ago. But I was on your Argos. It tells you I'm not a biased bettor or handicapper. You can't be. If you think the Argos are a good bet, even as a Ticat fan, you got to bet them. And that's exactly what I did in week 1. I thought giving them 6.5, 7 points against BC was just too much. BC had a terrible time winning in Toronto over the years. It had been 5 years since BC had won in Toronto. Now it's going to be 6 because they lost again in Toronto, and yet they were laying a touchdown, in that game or close to it against Toronto. So I thought Toronto was worth a look. I thought it was an overreaction point spread, Chris, because of Chad Kelly's suspension. I thought it was just that. Wait a minute. Kelly's out, and now all of a sudden Toronto's going to be a 7-point pooch at home, against BC. I thought it was an overreaction. I thought Cameron Dukes would be good enough. What I did not expect was Cameron Dukes to play that well. he was really good, I must admit. He was throwing the ball well on time. He found his receivers. I was concerned about the depth at receiver that the Argos had too, but Tavares Daniels and Dejon Brissett, Rasheed Bailey, Tommy Neal, the Hamilton or the McMaster product as well. They all stepped up. You look at that defensive line, like I said, it's very impressive group still that they have with Jordan Williams, with Brinkman, with Fuller and Arumalade. By the way, I met and talked to Arumalade last year at the Grey Cup Festival, and it tells you too. There's no, I can't hang with an Argo fan or an Argo player. Not this guy. I put that shit aside. We're all one CFL family, like I said, and great guy. Even though he plays for the Argos, great guy. Same thing with Serezna. I saw him at the festival too. Jake Serezna, big acquisition in the offseason from Edmonton in the trade that sent Curly Gittins Jr. the other way to the Elks. And again, really good to talk to last year at the Grey Cup Festival at one of the events. Heck of a player, too. He was a great player for Edmonton. I don't know why Edmonton traded him. Like, your defense has sucked, man, for the last 2 years. And you're giving away and trading away someone that's been a legit difference maker and disruptor as far as getting after the quarterback. And Serezna's been that for Edmonton. And look at the play he made on Vernon Adams a couple weeks ago, forcing that fumble in the fourth quarter of that game. So they've still got a lot of defensive difference makers along the line. I think when you look at the secondary, even though Jamal Peters is gone, you've still got Royce Mechie, you've still got Deshaun Amos, who's been pretty damn good in that secondary the last few years. That's still a very good defense. And my concern for Edmonton is, can the offense and McLeod Bethel Thompson avoid mistakes, against a defense like that? All that being said, Chris, we talk about overreaction in week 1, where Toronto was 6.5, 7-point dogs in week 1 against BC. And I thought the point spread was an overreaction to Chad Kelly being out. Now, 6-point home they go from basically 6.5-point home dogs to 6-point home favorites in this game. Now I think it's an overreaction on the other end, where I think now Toronto, I'd be concerned about laying a number like this with them. For as great as Dukes was, the offense was solid against BC. Defense made some big plays. I think now this is a different point spread roll. This is a different point spread range now for the Argos. Now you got to not only win, but you got to win this game by margin. And I think the one thing Edmonton can do, and we've kind of seen it in the first 2 weeks. I know they shit the bed in the fourth quarter against Saskatchewan in week 1, but let's not forget they were up by 13 going into the fourth quarter. The Montreal game, for the most part in that game, they were toe-to-toe. It was 7-7 after the first quarter. It was 17-13 at halftime, and it ended 23-20. They were in that game pretty much start to finish. That's all we're asking here if you're going to take Edmonton. Just be in the game. Be competitive. And the one thing McLeod Bethel Thompson will be in this game is highly fucking motivated. No question. Oh, yeah. To have a great game, to have a good game, and to try to get a victory here in his return to Toronto against his old team. So I'm on the Elks here, plus the points in this game. But this is the point spread role I want Edmonton in. Getting points. We've talked about how underdogs are 7-1 ATS this season in the CFL. Toronto, they cashed as a dog for me 2 weeks ago. I think it's time to go the other way here in this game and ask this Edmonton team to just be competitive, keep this a close game. And while Toronto was very good against BC, I think asking them now just all of a sudden to go from a 6.5-point home dog to a 6-point favorite and ask them to win by a touchdown or more here against a desperate team too. Let's keep that in mind. 0-2. Edmonton wants to stop the bleeding here. I don't know about win the game. I don't know if they will. I could see Edmonton losing by 3 or 4 here. But I think +6, I would look in that direction here as far as the side goes with the Elks and the Argos. And long-term, last year and especially 2-3 years ago, one thing I know about the Argos as home favorites at BMO Field, it's not been a great role for them when they've been laying bigger numbers at home over the years. What do you think here? Your Argos, Chris, have at it. What do you think? Edmonton, Toronto, Saturday night.
Well, first of all, it's not only the McLeod Bethel Thompson Bowl. It's the Javon Leake Bowl, the Curly Gittins,
That's a good point. There's multiple former Argos on this Elks team. Javon Leake's the new kick returner, who they poached from the Argos, and of course Gittins went to Edmonton in the Serezna deal.
Yeah.
Only Ceresna is the guy facing his old team on the Toronto side. Yeah.
But this is a dangerous matchup for the Argos. Do they have the edge on both lines? Yeah, and I personally value that greatly. Um, they're going to be able to dictate both sides of the line. But the one thing that you can't really account for is the fact that Edmonton 0-2. They've been in both games that they played, but that fan base is starving for victories at this point. Like their attendance is dwindling, and you got to wonder how much rope does Chris Jones have here? And I believe they have an early bye. It's either week 4 or 5. Um, I'm not sure if they could do it with the coaching cap thing, but this team needs to start winning. And is Chris Jones coaching for his job here? I expect a big performance out of Edmonton. I think McLeod, pending him being able to stay on his feet, will be good. But it's more what will the Argos do? Are they going to rest on their laurels? I mean, they did have an impressive performance down their starting quarterback, but they have a pretty solid team regardless of who's quarterback. And I personally wasn't surprised that they were able to hang into the game. I, I'm not going to lie, I was a little surprised that they were able to come out on top of it. So that was a bonus personally. But yeah, are they going to open the playbook up for Dukes here? Because in my opinion, that may be a downfall of theirs. I think they need to utilize that running game where they have a major advantage on the offensive line to Edmonton's defensive line, and on the flip side, it's get after McLeod. It's your calling card is stopping the run, and if you can get to McLeod, there's no way he's getting away. So, but at the same time, I'm nervous about this one, Ian. I think Edmonton has their best game of the year. I think
He
it's
does run on occasion, McLeod Bethel Thompson. I will say that. He does run on occasion. And if there's one game he's going to, quote unquote, empty the tank, if you will, and maybe look to scamper more than he normally would, it would probably be in a game like this.
yeah. I think they have to have a good game here. I just think time's running out on Chris Jones, and
they were better on the road last year, even though it was a horrendous season overall. Like we know the home losing streak and how bad it was before they finally snapped it. But on the road last year, for as bad as the season was for Edmonton, they did cover point spreads on the road.
Yeah.
Often.
And correct me if I'm wrong. They did not go to BMO last year.
Last year, I'm just going to bring up the stats. They did, but it was late in the season. They got crushed 35-12.
Okay.
In that game. It was late in the season. It's weird because they were actually right in that game early, but that's when Edmonton's season last year was that awful start, where they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games to start the year. And then they finally won their first game. And then all of a sudden, when they won their first game, they went like 4-1 straight up in ATS. They had that little run there in September.
Yeah.
And then they fell apart again in October down the stretch. But on the road last year, especially later in the year, they won in Hamilton. They had at Calgary, they lost by 4, but it was competitive. They won at Saskatchewan. They did have those games there last year where they started to win games and cover numbers. And to me, it's just with that apathetic fan base and that pathetic crowds they get at Commonwealth Stadium, it's almost like it's better. It's almost, Chris, like it's a better situation for Edmonton to be playing on the road right now.
Yeah. Yep. And they need this game. Playing at home sucks for them. As you said, 15,000 fans, and you have the revenge aspect. McLeod wanted to come back after taking forever to decide what he wanted to do. We had to move on. The Argos had to move on. Uh, but I remember watching that parade and him not being there. I thought it was weird. He had to get home. And I think it was him knowing that the Argos were ready to move on and go with Kelly.
Yeah.
I think, and he's a pretty prideful guy, so I think you may see him, kind of use that as try to use that as motivation. And I mean, if you stack the two teams together, the Argos probably the better team, but the game's not played on paper. Therefore, I'd side with the Elks +6 on this one.
Yeah, you and I in alignment again here on a side here in week 3. I agree. I think Edmonton +6 worth a look. Toronto's a team when they're in a pick'em range or an underdog. I'm more than happy to back them because I think they're this team is still going to be a good team this year. They're going to have a good season still, even with Chad Kelly missing half the year. So I think Cameron Dukes can play well enough. And like I said, I think. But now we're asking this young quarterback, for as solid as he was against BC, now win by margin, win by 7, win by 10. That's not necessarily as easy to be able to accomplish that. But it should be an interesting game there Saturday night with the Elks and the Argos. The Elks still, I would actually lean to the over a little bit in this game. 49.5, because to me, Edmonton's not playing the defense that I trust for unders. I know last week it stayed under, but Montreal's a dead nuts under team. I think that was more Montreal keeping that game under than Edmonton. Edmonton still gave up big plays. The explosives that they continue to allow, Chris, on defense bother me. And Toronto might be able to hit on some of those. But I could see McLeod airing it out a little bit too, because I still think that secondary for Toronto, if he can get the time, you can make some plays against them down the field. Because certainly Vernon Adams did. He did hit on a couple of deep balls, Vernon Adams, against that Toronto team, even though they lost. So I would go over in this game. I don't love it, but I would go over if I had to bet the total.
Yeah, I really don't have a feel on the total. That front 7 for Toronto is outstanding, and the inexperience in the back could be a key factor in that over.
Yeah.
Can a Romalati get around the edge? Can Serezna get up the middle? If that's the case, MBT, he's not going to have too much success. But if he gets a little second, he'll be able to pinpoint. He can pick up Geno Lewis, Curly Gittins. Like, these guys will be open because Toronto loves to blitz. They love bringing the house. They're not afraid to be aggressive. If it means it bites them on the other end like it did last week a couple times, so be it. I think they're willing to live with it. The fact that they'll probably get to you more often than not.
Yeah, I think so too. So it'll be interesting to see again how this game plays out. But to me, I just think McLeod. This might be actually a game to take a shot with McLeod Bethel. If there's ever a prop posted for him for over rushing yards, not that you'd ever want to bet this, but he's probably going to be flushed out of the pocket at least a few times during this game by that Argos defensive front, and I could see a bigger onus on him to run the football because you'll do anything to win this game if you're him. You're trying to avoid 0-3, and you're trying to beat your old team that cut you loose for the younger guy, Chad Kelly.
And the Argos are feeling good. The Argos are feeling good.
Yep.
So is this a letdown game?
They do usually off a bye. I don't like betting against teams off a bye week, but I don't like the bye week this early in the season.
Right.
You play one game and then you get the rhythm, and now you're sitting on your hands again for a week, and now you got to ramp it up again. I hate bye weeks in week 2. Hate them.
Yeah.
Yep. What do you think about that? You think that's a detriment more than a positive that Toronto has a bye week just like that in week 2 after a nice performance like they had against BC?
Well, I think they gear up all training camp ready for BC, knowing they have that bye. It's already in the back pocket. And then they play well,
Yep.
So are they going to be resting on their laurels? I think it's an extremely dangerous spot for them, just because they know the struggles of Edmonton. They know the guys on the other team. They're feeling good. Are they going to come out with that same fire as they did in week 1?
Exactly. That's going to be the big question. Can they just ramp that? Can they bring that performance again here? With a great performance, then all of a sudden you're off for 1 week. And when you play that well, like they did against BC, you want to keep it rolling. You want to play the next week.
Yeah.
You want to keep that train and that momentum going. But unfortunately, Toronto won't be able to. Well, Hamilton, we thought they were going to have some momentum going into this game because it sure looked like for what? For 55 minutes of the 60, a Hamilton victory was in the cards last week against Saskatchewan. But nope, nobody can snatch defeat from the jaws of victory like the Hamilton Ticats the last couple of years. And sure enough, they did. What a complete implosion down the stretch. Soft-ass, candy-ass coverage on that drive. Never mind the turnover that put them in position to win the game with the field goal. They lost the game with that soft-ass coverage and prevent defense. You know what prevent fucking defense does? Prevents you from winning. That's what it does. And that's exactly what we saw against for Hamilton's defense. Just too easy for Trevor Harris to move that ball down the field and matriculate those big pass plays to get them in position to tie that game with that late touchdown. And that's a game they just had no business losing, but somehow they did. And now they got to pick themselves up off the mat. They're now 0-2 because of that loss, and they've got to play this Saskatchewan Roughriders team again in a second back end of a home-and-home series between these two teams to wrap up Week 3 on Sunday night. It is Saskatchewan 2.5-point home favorites, 50.5 the total here in this game. This is a really, really interesting game. I don't know if I could. I'd probably lean Saskatchewan, quite honestly. Now, what would concern me about this spot is you have a huge comeback like that, Chris. Huge comeback. And I saw the celebrations after the game. Like, they celebrated pretty damn good. Why wouldn't you? You look dead to rights for 3.5 quarters, and you come back and you find a way to win that game. You deserve to celebrate a bit. But now you're coming into this game a little flat. You just came back in a stunning fashion to beat the Ticats last week, and you have the focus here to do it again. Even though at home, it's not the same. Look, for years, you didn't bet against Saskatchewan at home. You just didn't do it because they were just so good, Chris, on their home field. Last year, that wasn't the case. Last year at home, they were not good. They were burning money for their backers, Saskatchewan at home last year. Now, I will say this, and I've said this all season so far, because I'm on Saskatchewan over 7.5 wins, and I have a dark horse future on them to win the West Division, and at plus, I think, 550 it is, and also to win the Grey Cup this year, because I'm that high on the improvement Saskatchewan, I think, would make this year with Corey Mace, a winning individual, in my opinion, as their head coach, bringing him in from Toronto after a great run as DC there. Craig Dickinson was a disaster. I'm sorry. I'll just call it like I saw it. I thought he was inept. I thought everything about him last year was pathetic. Game management, clock management. He screwed up and botched so much shit for last year. Saskatchewan last year. It was ridiculous. Penalties. Now, look, there's been penalties too for Mace here in the first. It's clearly going to take Mace time to get the penalties out of Saskatchewan's system because they still had way too many last week. But the difference is there was no pushback from Saskatchewan last year. When they lost 7 straight, Chris, to end the season, there was no pushing back when they got behind in a game. This year, what have we seen from Saskatchewan with the new culture, with a guy like Corey Mace, who's a leader of men now in charge? They don't give up. They play 4 quarters. They never believe they're out of a game. They pulled the comeback against Edmonton. They did it again last week against Hamilton. That is a real confidence builder for a team. And, basically, extricating the demons and the horrific season of last year for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Plus, don't also forget that while the coach is a lot better this year, they now have a healthy Trevor Harris, who is one of my good friends in the league right now. Just an outstanding performance by him both weeks to come back in the fourth quarter. He's healthy. He's a lot better than the Jake Dolagalas of the world and the Mason Fines of the world and everybody, any other quarterback you can think of that played for Saskatchewan in that disaster year last year. With a healthy Trevor Harris, he gives them their best chance to win. Their receiving core is a lot better this year. Samuel Emelis, Sean Bain, Kean Schaefer-Baker. Now, there are some injuries to that receiving core. Sean Bain left the game last week against the Hamilton Ticats, did not return. So his status for this game is going to be up in the air just a little bit. When you look at the rest of the receiving core, I will say this, though. While they missed Bain, I thought, wow, that's going to be trouble. The guy that came into that game for Saskatchewan last week ended up playing well. Aju, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. He was really, really good. He made a couple of big-time plays late in that game and in the fourth quarter to help that Saskatchewan comeback effort against the Ticats last week. So, obviously a huge loss for Sean. Sean Bain's been awesome. He had the 3 touchdowns against Edmonton, of course, but Aju was good. They've still got Emelis, Schaefer Baker. This Jareth Stearns kid out of Western Kentucky's really been solid for them as well. They've still got enough. They've got AJ. What's scary about it, Saskatchewan too? They're 2-0 and they haven't gotten AJ Olette going yet. They really have not been able to run the football at all, which is shocking to me. You would think that's going to end up coming about. I think last week it was pathetic to see how awful both of these teams were running the football. James Butler couldn't get going for Hamilton, and of course, AJ Olette couldn't get going for Saskatchewan. So both of these teams have had issues. At least last week, certainly had issues running the ball. Do they commit more to the run game this week? Does the Saskatchewan offensive coordinator Mueller commit more to running the ball? Does Scott Milanovic, commit more to running the football this week for the Hamilton Ticats and for James Butler, because there was no run game to speak of really for either team last week. So it'll be interesting to see what the game plan is offensively. What I do know, Chris, is that these two defenses, they stink right now. They're really not that good. Saskatchewan, I think in time, I think they'll be good. I think they'll be a good defense in September and October. They're not a good defense now. It's going to take Corey Mace time. For as good as he is in that side of the ball, it's going to take him time to mold the chemistry, to get his system down pat, and to get this defense playing better. Because right now there's no pass rush. Bo Levi Mitchell had tons of time last week, and he picked them. And that secondary was horrendous. Absolutely awful for Saskatchewan last week. Bo Levi Mitchell picked them apart. There's receivers running 20 yards wide open, 15 yards wide open in the end zone on the Keandre Smith catch, the one that Dunbar had. He's wide open, and so Saskatchewan's got issues in their secondary. That being said, so does Hamilton. They got Jamal Peters back, and there's still busts in coverage happening down the field in their secondary too. Kenneth George is not playing well. You got to do something there. They got some young faces as well in that secondary. It's just they're getting picked apart through the air as well. Now with these two teams playing 2 weeks in a row, sometimes what I'll look to do is bet the reverse of what happened the first game. So you had a high-scoring game one, and my best bet last week was the over in this game, and it ended 33-30 for Saskatchewan. Sometimes you look at when the same two teams play each other the very next week, sometimes you'll see the opposite. It'll be lower scoring. You'll see adjustments on defense, and it'll go under the total. And, of course, you've also got a higher total this week. It was 47-48. I think it closed at 49 last week, and now it's 50.5 for this game. But I don't think I can bet under with these two defenses right now, even in a rematch situation. Bo Levi Mitchell looked as good as he's looked in a Ticat uniform last week, easily. That was his best game. It wasn't even close. That was his best game with the Ticats last week. Finding, all the receivers except Tim White. And that brings me to this rant. Tim White wants to flap his gums in the offseason. I'm one of the best receivers in the CFL. I deserve $300,000 a season and deserves the big money in his new contract. Well, the Ticats paid him. So your job, once you get that money, is you've got to play like it and make impact plays and make big-time catches and big moments for your team now that you're getting paid like a premier receiver. And he has been absolutely inept in these first two games. Drop passes left and right. He had multiple drop passes, including a touchdown against Calgary in week one. He dropped another last week, and then there was the interception that he bobbled in the air in the fourth quarter that led to Saskatchewan being able to win it with the field goal. He's been awful. I can't say it enough. He's been horrendous in these first two games, especially with the money now he's making for the Hamilton Ticats. Tim White's got to step up. Simple as that. You're getting paid as a premier receiver. You need to start acting like it and playing like it. And he has been anything but that in the first 2 weeks for the Hamilton Ticats. So, again, all I heard all offseason was how frustrated he was that Ticats weren't giving him what he deserved. Well, you got the money. Start to play like it. Period. End of story. He's got to be a lot better. He's supposed to be the best receiver on this team. He's been the worst so far in the first 2 weeks of the season. So we'll see how this one goes. If you believe in the revenge angle, you take Hamilton. I don't know if I can. I don't trust it. I don't know what we get. They're either still in the dumps and just in the, after just a catastrophic loss last week, or they pull the bootstraps up. They go to Saskatchewan angry, pissed off, determined, and they go there and they beat them. I could see either situation happening, quite honestly. So for me, I would probably play the over again, if anything, in this game. I just don't trust either of these defenses. Although, again, I'm a little worried about that too, because sometimes in these rematch situations, the same two teams playing each other, it goes over the first game, second game stays under, and vice versa. The first game goes under, the second game goes over. When it's the same two teams playing each other 2 straight weeks. But I still would only look at the over in spite of that, because I just don't think the defenses are there yet right now at any sort of decent to high caliber level for either team. Chris, what do you think here? The finale for week 3, Hamilton, Saskatchewan.
Yeah, if anything, I'm taking the over in this game. Let's talk about the positives for Hamilton. Bo Levi is throwing for over 300 in the first 2 games.
Just occurred to me, we got to get you some lighting in your room now, because I can see it's getting dark there.
What time is it? It's probably it's about 8:30. So it's getting dark.
It is. Yep.
Yeah, Keandre Smith, Steven Dunbar. If you could ever get a semblance of a run game, like you did in week 1, that'd be huge. But there's holes all over the field for the defense in Saskatchewan. Losing Nick Marshall, okay, I guess maybe that's a plus.
They miss him more than they thought.
Yeah,
yeah.
But
the secondary's been garbage. Let's call it like we see it for Saskatchewan. Even though they are 2-0, it's not been because of that position group. That's for fucking sure.
And coming into the year from a Hamilton perspective, you knew you were going to struggle on defense, losing Simone and Ted Laurent. Those are 2. Yeah. Those are your corners.
Oh yeah, there's no pass rush for us right now so far. Yeah.
So you know that's a work in
Other
progress.
than Barlow. Barlow's the one exception. Yeah.
Yeah. But even getting Jamal Peters, he can't cover the whole field.
No.
And plus, football is a game of teamwork, and if you got one guy, it don't really matter.
Yeah.
So I don't see him stopping anyone. I don't see why we would all of a sudden assume that this is going to be a defensive battle when they prove to us that they can't stop anything. So
both 2-0 to the over. Both teams so far this year. Yep.
And if anything, we need 51 points. Both teams score. I don't think there's going to be a problem getting points in this game.
To me, that's just the safer bet. I think the side is tricky. And I love Saskatchewan this year. But I don't know if Hamilton, I think, could be angry, pissed off, and get their redemption here and win. Or they could be still totally off kilter that, we're going to have to definitely get you some light in that room. Now you're just a black figure right now.
Let me get the blinds here.
There we go. Yeah. I was going to say, it's just a black hole beside me right now.
I noticed.
There you go. That's a little better.
As we've gone on progressively, I've progressively gotten darker in tone.
There we go. That's right. Yeah. There we go. The light's on in somebody's home right now. No doubt. I'm with you. I think if the total's the better look here, the better route to go. I think there's a lot of volatility with the side. Hamilton could be still stunned from last week, and it's not easy to win in Saskatchewan either. And here's the thing, too. Hamilton historically has been terrible in Regina over the last 10 to 20 years. I think they've won once in their last 14 or 15 trips to Saskatchewan, and it was last year when they finally won in Saskatchewan late in the year, and that was when Saskatchewan was just a shit show. They were collapsing down the stretch, losing one game after another. Dolagala was their quarterback. Dickinson was a dead duck, a lame duck coach. The team was already falling out of the playoffs. I don't want to put too much stock in, and I don't want to praise the Ticats too much for that win. The one win that they've had in Saskatchewan, I think, in the last decade, because it's just been a house of horrors for them. So that's why I can't take Hamilton, and I won't be. I'll cheer for them, obviously, as a fan and ticket holder, but that's it. It won't be putting any financial investment on them. But I also don't know if I want to buy high on Saskatchewan this week, coming off a win like that, where you just come back from the blue and dead to rights. You look like you were going to lose that game, and you find a way to win. Now you got to lay points with them. I don't know if it's the right spot or the right time to take Saskatchewan here either. So that's why I think the total is going to be where the focus is for me here in this game on Sunday night. But should be interesting after what we saw last week in that wild finish with the Riders and the Ticats. Should be interesting to watch that rematch play out on Sunday night in Saskatchewan next week. Looking forward to that, no doubt. For the Ticats, they got to shore up the secondary. Pass rush has to be a little bit better. and they got to get the run game going. As much as it was great to see Bo Levi Mitchell have a phenomenal game through the air, they couldn't do any. It was a one-dimensional offense. Really, it was for both teams, in that game last week. So who's going to be able to get their run game going? Can Butler get going for the Ticats? Can Ouellette get going for the Rough Riders? That's going to be the interesting element to this game coming up here.
Can either defense show
Sunday.
up?
Yeah, exactly. Can they stop with the busts in coverage and giving up to so many, both teams, just too many explosive plays allowed last week in that game. So we'll see if both of them can shore things up there as far as that's concerned. All right, there you have it. That is week 3 in the CFL. Great analysis, Chris Dalvis, with tremendous insight. You can tell he follows the CFL, loves it, stays on top of things with great insight. Looking forward to, of course, week 3 unfolding. And don't look now, Chris. I'm already heavy into NFL and college football preparation for the season ahead. And I'm already starting to put my NFL and college football season win totals and futures report that I send out every year. I am getting that ready to go so that I'm ready to send that out by August 1st.
It's a great time of year.
Around the corner. It is. NFL and college football, and that report has been very good over the years, which goes to a great segue into reminding everyone that if you want to sign up, there's the website for my all sports year-round subscription, dubclub.win/r/Bobano. Again, 1 year all sports is $750, where there are some sites that charge $500 for 1 month of all sports. So we are truly, $75 monthly for all sports for me, compared to sites that charge $250 or more for monthly all sports. Again, it's a bargain. I'm a high volume bettor, so you're getting your bang for your buck. Long-term profitable results across multiple seasons and multiple sports. Again, sign up, dubclub.win/r/Bobano. Sides, totals, player props. I include all of it with the plays and with the card on a daily basis. So again, make sure you check that out, dubclub.win/r/Bobano. Chris, this has been an awesome show. We're just about to wrap things up, but before we do, we need a best bet to wrap up the show. Best bet segment time. I'm 2-0 with best bets, and both of them were Saskatchewan games over the total. I had Saskatchewan Edmonton over as my best bet in week 1, and I had Saskatchewan Hamilton over as my best bet in week 2 here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. We'll see if we can keep it going with a third straight best bet winner to begin the season. Chris, though, we'll start with you. What do you got for your CFL week 3 best bet?
Okay, Ian, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it. It's my first time doing this. But my best bet of the week is Ottawa plus 6.5.
I co-sign that. I do. Ottawa Redblacks plus 6.5 against the Montreal Alouettes on Thursday night. Best bet for Chris Dalvis here on this edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. My best bet here, we're looking for 3-0 to start the season. I'm going to go Edmonton Elks, believe it or not, plus 6 against Toronto. Ottawa was a good choice. That was definitely in consideration for best bet. I think I like that Hamilton. I like going back to the well once again with that Hamilton Saskatchewan over as well. But I just think Edmonton, it makes sense. I think they're better. They're relaxed more on the road. They get away from that morgue type of atmosphere at Commonwealth Stadium, which is just an embarrassment to see how apathetic, and they make the Toronto Argo home crowds look good right now. The Edmonton Elks, with what they're drawing at Commonwealth Stadium. They get away from that. They go on the road for the first time this year. Desperate team at 0-2. McLeod Bethel Thompson making his return to Toronto, facing his old team. I think if there's a spot to maybe back him and to bring his A game and have a heck of a performance, or at least as good as he possibly can, it's here. A highly motivated quarterback against his old team. I am concerned about the line of scrimmage, really, on both sides. Can Edmonton protect against that fierce Argo D-line? Can they also get their run game going? Can they also get pressure on Dukes with their defensive front against that Toronto O-line? That's a question. But I think Edmonton
can Javon Leake make a difference?
That's true. He's another guy against his old team, a big kick return. And, special teams can make the difference. And Edmonton has a game breaker and a game changer now on special teams with the former Argo Javon Leake returning kicks for them. So I'm going to take my chance here this week with Edmonton +6. I'm going to kind of bite the hand that fed me in week 1 because I took Toronto against BC in week 1, and now I'm going against them here in week 3. So Edmonton +6 against Toronto in the McLeod Bethel Thompson Bowl for my best bet. Chris, final words before we wrap it up. Great to have you. You did a great job.
Looking forward to this week, especially tomorrow. I think that's the game of the week, the Ottawa-Montreal game. Is the league starting to swing from the East being the pushover?
The balance of power is what you're asking.
The balance of power is what I'm saying. Is that swinging towards the East now? I think this game's going to go a long way if Ottawa can come out and do what we think. I would say the weaker teams, at least at this point, seem to be in the West.
Lot of questions. Like Winnipeg looks down. BC looks still pretty good, but a little bit down maybe from last year at this point. Calgary is still an unknown for me. I think they've been actually a little bit better because I had them as my last place team coming into the season, Calgary. They've actually played better than that in the 1-1 start. Edmonton still got issues, obviously. Saskatchewan has looked great in the West so far through 2 games. But in the East, Ottawa looks improved. Montreal doesn't look like they're going anywhere after being Grey Cup champs. Toronto, I think people overreacted that they're going to hit the shits just because Chad Kelly's gone or suspended. I think they're good enough still in the trenches on the O-line, D-line, and their personnel and roster overall. Toronto, I think, is still good enough to keep them a good football team, even without Chad Kelly. And then you look at my Ticats, even though they're 0-2, they could easily be 2-0. They could have won both of those games
easily
against Calgary and Saskatchewan. So you're right, the East, it looks like slowly but surely they're not the whipping boy top to bottom as much this year to the West counterparts than they've been in the past. No doubt. All right, great stuff, Chris. We appreciate it. We know it's getting late there, so we're going to wrap this up. Shout out to everyone that's watching this show on YouTube. Hit the like button on the way out. We appreciate it very much. And again, this show is recorded every Wednesday throughout the CFL season. And again, that's the CFL version of this show. We'll be doing the NFL and college football version of this show. So it'll be 3 Football Frenzy shows a week once we get into September, 1 for each CFL, college, and NFL. So looking forward to that. For Chris Dalvis, our guest, I'm Ian Cameron. Have a great week. Enjoy CFL Week 3, and we will be back next Wednesday for Week 4 of the CFL and another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.